You are listening to First Metro Securities Philippine Stock Market Weekly podcast, delivered every Tuesday, where we feature timely and relevant discussions on the Philippine stock market and the economy in the hope of providing you investing and trading guidance. Here's your host, Royce Aguilar, from the Research Department at First Metro Sec.
Okay, so welcome to another episode of Stock Market Weekly podcast by First Metro Securities. So, usually the first thing we'll do here is talk about the weekly summary and outlook for the PSCI, and then we'll mention our stock picks. After which, we'll talk about a theme, and our theme for this week is all about vaccine. So we're more scientific this week. In terms of the PSCI, so let's get started. Last week, the PSCI extended its decline to close at 5,785.09. So we were down by 99 points or 1.7% week on week. So we saw heavy net foreign selling persisted due to lack of positive catalysts after GCQ was extended anew for 1 month. So losses were paired in the latter part of the week due to improving economic data after we saw an unemployment rate in July 2020 ease to 10% from the record rate of 17.7% in April 2020. Also, inflation came in lower than expected at 2.4%. compared to estimate of 2.7%, even below PSP's estimate of 2.5 to 3.3. The market also stabilized in the latter part of the week after credit rating company Moody's affirmed Philippines Baa2 rating despite lowering its GDP forecast here in the Philippines to 7% from 4.5. So in terms of volume, last week it was only at 5.5 billion. And as mentioned earlier, net foreign selling persisted by 3.8 billion last week. In terms of what we think will happen this week, so the market may rebound after known research team from Okta and UP Professor Guido David explained that besides reduced positivity rate, there's also lower COVID-19 reproductive numbers. It's actually a metric they use to describe the rate of virus transmission. So it actually decreased by 0.05 last week. So in terms of volume, it may be lower at the start of the week given that there's actually a celebration of Labor Day in the US yesterday, September 7. So, in terms of our stock picks, so we have 3 all buy picks. So, let's get started first with the gaming related. So, this actually, you can see the more elaborated explanation for this in our playbook released last Friday. So, we have Bloomberry. So, according to this media production company based in Macau, Inside Asian Gaming, several casinos in Manila have reportedly been granted permission to resume gaming operations at limited capacity. So, Melco, the parent company of City of Dreams Manila, disclosed that it has received the directive last August 24, allowing PAG-core licensed casinos in areas covered by GCQ to operate at 30% capacity. So, other Manila integrated resort operators have reportedly confirmed that they have been likewise granted permission to reopen pending certain safety measures. This helps Bloomberry Resorts Corp, and another buy pick that we have for this week is Premium Leisure Corp. So this helps both Bloom and PLC to pare their losses for the year. So first, for Bloom, it incurred net loss of 3.3 billion for the first half of the year compared to net income last first half of 2019 at 4.7 billion. So of course, we know that there was a shutdown from March until some part in June because from the middle of June, some companies already were allowed to have a dry run where they allow certain private customers to do some gaming inside their casino. So for PLC, it incurred net loss in the first half of the year of 27 million compared to net income of 1.4 billion last year. So in terms of strategy, for Bloom, we recommend buying after it went above 6.90. Of course, you can buy when it pulls back to specifically 6.90. Just set your cut loss below 6.30. For PLC, we recommend buying once it goes back above 0.3250. So, set cut loss below 0.2850. Another buy pick that we have is EEI Corp. So, EEI Corp has also rallied recently. Why? Because the DOTR Secretary Arthur Togade said that the agency, together with its partners, are determined to complete the partial operability section of the 357 billion Metro Manila subway project by December 2021. So despite the impact of the pandemic, the subway project is pushing through. So DOTR added that the first and second tunnel boring machines will be delivered in the country by January or February 2021. So recall that the joint venture of EI Corp, and it has 3 Japanese partners, will be in charge of designing and construction of the subway's partial operability section, which consists of first 3 underground stations. So, of course, EI was sold down by nearly 35% year to date due to expected delays in the company's construction projects given the pandemic. This news might be welcoming for investors looking to accumulate companies which have positive catalysts for next year. So actually, once the tunnel boring machines arrive, it's also a big catalyst for the company because the arrival of the tunnel boring machines is a huge progress if you're trying to build a subway. So price action also looks bullish. We recommend accumulating at current prices or in pullbacks around 6 pesos. So if you think that the rally was overextended last week, you could buy at pullbacks at 6 pesos. So that's it for our weekly summary and outlook and stock picks. Okay, so our theme for the week, we're gonna go a bit scientific for this week, because at the end of the day, we're going to talk about vaccine. The race is on. So basically, we are going to talk about this because at the end of the day, that's the main catalyst for any stock market right now. And I would like to show you which vaccines are to watch, or which vaccines are currently leading the race. So we're going to talk about that. But of course, I'm going to tell you the current scenario in terms of the coronavirus vaccines. So right now, we have around 200 experimental vaccines aimed at ending the pandemic. So it's a scientific quest moving at record-breaking speed. I will tell you that in a short while. So in terms of the numbers, we have 170 plus vaccines that are currently in preclinical trials. So that means that they are being tested still in animals, right? And not necessarily proven yet. So that's for the preclinical. That's where most experimental vaccines are. But some had made strides. So we have vaccines that are currently undergoing phase 1 and phase 2. So simultaneously undergoing phase 1 and phase 2, we have around 19 vaccines. And then for phase 3, we have 7 vaccines, right? And that's the 7 vaccines are the ones that we are going to mostly elaborate later on. And then we have 0 vaccines approved. So of course, I'm sourcing the World Health Organization here. So of course, we're going to talk about the Russian vaccine that has been dubbed as the first one being approved. But at the end of the day, for the WHO, it's not yet approved. So actually, they're still classifying the Russian vaccine as phase 1. So let's talk about a bit about the Russian vaccine. So according to the Russian Direct Investment Fund, so that's actually the one who financed the development, around 20 countries in Latin America, Middle East, and Asia had already submitted pre-orders for 1 billion doses of the Russian vaccine called Sputnik 5. So the Philippines actually plans on beginning phase 3 trials in our country by October 2020. So our country is actually willing to be part of the trials. So according to the Philippines, so it may actually be approved by the local drug authority by April 2021. The Russian Direct Investment Fund has revealed plans to begin mass production of Sputnik 5 in India and South Korea in partnership with local sovereign wealth funds. However, of course, several other countries have expressed their concerns regarding the safety of the vaccine. So Russia's own Association of Clinical Trial Organization, so that's a non-governmental group representing major drug companies, urged the Kremlin to postpone registering the vaccine until a phase 3 trial was completed. So for Russia, what they claimed is they already went through both phase 1 and phase 2. What Russia clarified though is that it has no intention of making its vaccine widely available before conducting phase 3 trials. So the main purpose of registering the vaccine now is to get started on the procedures needed to clear it for mass production. So Russia's current plan is to simultaneously carry out phase 3 trials and begin preparing mass production for what they called Sputnik 5. So that's for Russia, right? Okay, so let's go back now to my source. So according to WHO, according to the data compiled by Washington Post and Bloomberg. So let's start. So the worldwide effort to create a vaccine for the coronavirus kicked off even past last January, right? So soon after scientists in China posted online the genome of a virus causing mysterious pneumonia, that's when they already started the efforts in finding vaccine. So usually vaccine development takes years and unfolds step by step. Experimental vaccine candidates are created in the lab, tested in animals, as I've mentioned in the preclinical, before moving into progressively larger human clinical trials. So these steps are now overlapping in the race to find a vaccine for a global disease that has killed hundreds of thousands of people, right? At least. So human testing began in some cases before animal studies were finished. As companies launched phase 1 trials intended to establish a correct dose, they're already planning the phase 3 trials that evaluate whether the vaccines are effective and safe. So no steps are being skipped, according to top government officials. So they have repeatedly promised that vaccines will not be considered for approval in the States after a large phase 3 trial. So the Food and Drug Administration there, which has the ultimate say on whether a vaccine has been proved safe and effective, says that the vaccine for COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus, will need to prevent the disease or decrease symptoms in at least 50% of those who receive the said vaccine. So other countries may use different standards or authorize vaccine without waiting for proof if they are safe and effective. So, of course, for Russia, they have this process, right? Different process. So, even China has authorized a vaccine for use in members of the military before starting phase 3. So, Russia, China have different process compared to the other countries, right? So, that's what's notable here. That's why the WHO has not yet classified Russia as a phase 3. So, because they have a different process. So, like I've said earlier, the scientific quest of finding this approved COVID-19 vaccine is happening at an unprecedented speed. So researchers in the US set this goal in January to develop a coronavirus vaccine within 12 to 18 months. And that would be a world record because the mumps vaccine, which is considered to be fastest to move, had the vaccine in 4 years. So coronavirus vaccines are moving much faster, partly because governments are taking on the financial risk of developing a vaccine that may or may not work. So in the US, they have this Operation Warp Speed, wherein the US government has invested about $9.5 billion to speed up the development and start manufacturing before research is finished. So that's the introduction here, right? So I'm going to show you different types of vaccine. There are actually 4 classifications. But first, fun fact, right? So the core of the coronavirus is a single strip of this RNA, ribonucleic acid, surrounded by a protein shell. So the virus is actually named for the iconic spikes that project from its center like a crown, or corona in Latin. So these spike proteins aren't just decorations, right? They are actually critical for the virus to get inside cells and make copies of itself. The vaccines work by teaching the body's immune system to recognize and block these kinds of viruses. So each category of vaccine technology works under this basic principle. So the vaccines aim to activate the immune system's helper cells. So these are responsible for detecting the presence of the virus. So we have 4 types of vaccine technology here. So I'm going to present to you each classification and the notable vaccine leading the race under that classification of technology. Okay, so first classification is the vaccines using nucleic acid, so DNA and RNA. So to be specific about it, so these DNA vaccines contain genetic material that carries the blueprint for the spike protein. So these vaccines have the advantage of speed, meaning they can be quickly designed and manufactured, but they have never been approved for use outside of medical research and will likely require 2 doses. So vaccines using nucleic acid, so DNA, RNA, which companies or vaccines are leading under this type of technology? So first we have Moderna. So this is a US-based company. So basically, based from my source, the expected trial end date here is October 27, 2022 for Moderna. So in terms of recent data I've compiled, or recent news for Moderna, So what's currently happening with the company, with their trials and the like. So enrollment of the 30,000 people taking part in the clinical assessment is expected to be completed later this month, with results slated for as early as October 2020. So Moderna, in late August 2020, said that it intends to supply 80 million doses of its experimental coronavirus vaccine to the European Union, with an option for the member states to purchase an additional 80 million doses. In early August 2020, Moderna agreed to provide 100 million doses of the vaccine to the US government for about $1.5 billion. So more than 10% of the government's Operation Warp Speed program was allocated to the Moderna vaccine. So that's the first one under the vaccines using nucleic acid. The second one is BioNTech by Pfizer Inc. For Pfizer, the company's senior vice president actually said that the company is targeting to deliver its vaccine on November 1, 2 days before the US election. Could this statement be political or not? We don't know. Because US election is scheduled on November 3 and they plan to deliver the vaccine by November 1. Nevertheless, the company's management emphasized that the vaccine must be safe and well tolerated among all else. So Pfizer will be working in cooperation with the Food and Drug Administration to make sure all safety guidelines are met. So Moderna and Pfizer are currently undergoing phase 3 trials to at least 30,000 people each. Okay, so for Pfizer, right, so they're targeting by November 1. For Moderna, according to my source, the expected trial end is October 27, 2022. But again, this came from the United States, so 2 weeks from now, there could be a faster progress and the like. So that's our first classification. So second is viral vectored vaccine. So for viral vectored vaccine, some vaccines use a virus that has been engineered to be harmless to ferry a gene from the coronavirus into cells. So these viral vectored vaccines can be designed quickly. One concern is that people can develop immunity to the viral vector, making this approach potentially less useful if booster shots need to be given. Okay, so there are actually 2 companies leading under viral vectored vaccine. So number 1 is UK's or United Kingdom's Oxford University made AstraZeneca. Okay, so this is actually one of the front runners right now. So the AstraZeneca shot is one of the farthest along of numerous COVID-19 vaccines in development. So in addition to the trials involving 30,000 adults, a final stage of the inoculation is underway in the UK and could yield preliminary results as soon as next month, right? AstraZeneca disclosed that it reached agreements already with several governments, US, UK, and other organizations to produce at least 2 billion doses of vaccine, with the first delivery starting as early as this month. That's for AstraZeneca. Okay, so another under viral vector vaccine is China's CanSino Biologics. Okay, so this is under China right now. No specific, nothing much in terms of details for this China vaccine, but what we know is some of the phase 3 trials are expected to complete the first round of vaccinations in early September. So there could be preliminary data as early as November. So that's for CanSino Biologics. We'll discuss later on a couple more China-made vaccines. Okay, so third classification right now we have is subunit vaccine. So some traditional vaccines work by delivering viral proteins to cell. So the technology here is to manufacture these protein fragments. But the problem here is companies are using insect cells and yeast. So the hepatitis B vaccine relies on a viral protein created by genetically engineered yeast. So nothing much here, because if you take a look at the vaccines leading here, none yet have undergo phase 3 trials. So for the subunit vaccines, no leaders yet, right? And the last one that we have is called weakened or inactivated virus vaccine. So this one utilizes a more old-fashioned approach. So basically, inactivated virus vaccine contain dead virus incapable of infecting people but still able to instruct the immune system how to mount a defensive reaction against an infection. So the polio actually used this kind of technology, the weakened or inactivated virus vaccine. However, these vaccines typically take longer to manufacture. So this is where we actually find the last 2 vaccine that are currently undergoing phase 3 trials. So we have China's National Pharmaceutical Group and one from Sinovac Biotech. So actually, right, for the China National Pharmaceutical Group, there are actually two vaccines that they made are already undergoing phase 3 trials. So, like I've mentioned earlier, some of the phase 3 trials are expected to complete the first round of vaccinations in early September 2020, and preliminary data can be released as early as November 2020. So, the vaccines of China National Pharmaceutical Group have been approved for clinical trials in several countries in the Middle East and South America, involving more than 30,000 people. Meanwhile, a COVID-19 vaccine developed by Sinovac is undergoing phase 3 clinical trials in some countries in South America and Southeast Asia. Okay, so that concludes our podcast this week regarding vaccines, the top coronavirus vaccines to watch right now. So I hope you've gotten a bit of knowledge in terms of companies and which countries are actually leading the vaccine race right now. So that's it for this Philippine Stock Market Weekly Podcast. I'm Royce Aguilar of the Equity Research Department. As always, your future first.
Thanks for listening to First Metro Securities Philippine Stock Market Weekly Podcast. Don't forget to follow us to get first dibs on our new episodes. For more up-to-date market news and info, exclusive content, and the opportunity to connect with your fellow Filipino investors and traders, join facebook.com/groups/First Metrosec and be part of the First Metrosec family.